Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Oh my goodness. This is our first Connect session of 2025. We are really excited for this series that we're putting on. And I feel like it's really perfectly set for the beginning of the year when so many people are having conversations of how can I do more? But a lot of the times it's not necessarily how can I do more? It's how can I feel satisfied in what I'm already doing? When is enough enough? And conversations along those lines. How do we begin to challenge societal norms and societal expectations when we're really just humans doing our best? And sometimes we live in a world that has made it feel like we have to be these machines, which is not realistic. And it might be why some of us are a little bit on the struggle bus every once in a while. And for those of you who are here currently, I like to see where we're all tuning in from. I love to see our cultural differences. I love to see who we are, what we're doing. So put in the chat where you're tuning in from. I think seeing like this cool web of who's here and where the energy is coming from is really fun. And it's just nice to see where everyone's coming in from. I'm in North Carolina personally. I know that Dr. Dave is in Portland. No, Seattle. Seattle, Washington, right? Making things up. And then we have Philip in California. But cool, we've got people from Texas, Arizona, Indiana. We've got Connecticut. Justin, I'm so happy to see you here for our second series. I know you had great success with our financial well-being series. You guys are just popping off in the chat. We got Indiana, Arizona, Texas again, Massachusetts. We got a lot of Arizona, which I love to see. Florida, Indiana, Massachusetts. Cool. Well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you have team members that you work with who you think could benefit from this conversation, send them the link. Give them a reason to have a conversation that's meaningful and helps them move in a little bit of a different direction that will bring more fulfillment and more meaning in their lives. Because when we put on all of our events programming at Life Guides, we are not sitting down and having this conversation of we should put on an event. We're having the conversation of we want to have create meaning in people's lives, and the events are our avenue for doing that. So there's a lot of purpose and intentionality that goes into these conversations that we have and the way that we show up with you. And you'll see that I have two wonderful gentlemen here with me. I will give them a formal introduction after we do a little bit of our opening credits. However, we do have Dr. Dave, our VP of Guides at Life Guides, and then we have Philip himself. He's one of our guides, and he also does a lot of other things in his life as well, which you'll be hearing about as we continue on. A lot of us are very multifaceted, multi-passionate, multi-directed creatures. And I think it's why it's important for us to have the conversation of how do we find the happiness over hustle? How do we find that balance in our lives? So as I'm giving you all the intro to what Life Guides is, I would love to know, drop 111 in the chat if you have been to a Life Guides virtual event before, and drop 222 in the chat if this is your first time here with us. I'm really curious to see what we've got going on. So what is Life Guides? Some of you might know exactly what Life Guides, some of you might have used us on a regular basis, but I also know a lot of you have no idea yet, which is really beautiful. So, Life Guides is essentially a human to human connection platform. So, if you've ever had mentorship or coaching, it follows a lot of the foundations of that, where you have someone helping guide you in life. And I've been telling the story about when I was in Rome. We did our whole entire self guided tour of Rome. We saw the Colosseum, we saw the Trevi Fountain, and we did the things that you're supposed to see. And we had an amazing time. We were so astounded by the history of Rome, and we didn't know that there was more. And you know, sometimes that feeling of like you don't know what you don't know, that's where Life Guides gets to come in. Because we ended up walking out of the Colosseum. We saw a tour guide who sounded really cool and looked really awesome and had lived in Rome for like 10 years. And he took us on a tour guide, and I am not even kidding. Within about 10 steps of the tour, he blew our minds in ways that we had never known. We had seen all of the main things of Rome that you're supposed to see, but we take 10 steps out of our Airbnb and he has us looking at the ground. Why are we looking at the ground on a tour? We're looking at the ground because Rome is all cobblestones, but the cobblestones in this area specifically were gold. And all day, the whole entire time, you know you're walking on cobblestones, but you're not really looking down. So he had us look down at something that's always been there and something that's always been there right in front of our eyes, but we never knew to see and that we never knew to look at. And he told us that this homes that have cobblestones that are gold in front of them are the homes where the Jewish people were just pulled out of their homes and taken to camps and really never seen again. And I would have never known personally about that or the significance of it if it wasn't for someone being like, hey, look here. I know you've done all the standard things that everyone tells you to, but there's a lot of specialness that maybe you don't know. So that's what Life Guides gets to do for you as well. Maybe you are on a really good path in your life and you just want to know how to get a little bit more clear and have more direction. Maybe you're going through a big thing in your life and you need support and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do it alone anymore. Or maybe after this conversation today, you're like, dang, I really would love to put myself as a human first instead of a machine. And I know that there are guides that are help me. So they're casual and meaningful conversations that you get to have with someone who has navigated the path that you're on, but gets to help you because they have the experience and they have the expertise through already going through the things that you might be in the middle of. So, with that, you can use life guides in a lot of different ways. These events are one way. And then we also have our actual platform where you can register for a call with a guide and have them support you on your journey. And beyond that, the way that Being Human First works is that the second Wednesday of every month for the next 3 months, we're going to have this session with me and Dr. Dave and a guide, a new guide every month. And then the third Wednesday of every month, we're going to actually have live coaching. So if you're like, Kira, I don't know how I feel about a one-on-one call, but I'm down to come to a webinar, or I'm really open to going to a live coaching session, then next week is going to be the perfect place for you to be able to have access to that without having like the full commitment of a guide. Because sometimes that's a lot for people. So here's the link for our live coaching session next week, should this conversation be of meaningful importance to you and you want to continue on with support on your journey. So with all of that being said about what Life Guides is, I have some cool humans that I get to introduce you to. So we have Dr. Dave here. He is our VP of our guides community. He has degrees in neuroscience. He has done a lot of really cool things in his life, but also beyond that, he's just a human doing his best, operating with a lot of different balancing priorities. And as we dive in, Dr. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about what being human first means to you in regards to finding happiness versus the hustle and bringing balance into your life in that way?
So it's really hard to put humans into a box or even put into words. Like I've been really thinking about this question for days because it's complex. So I think being human first starts with being okay with the complexity and the subtle, differences. I like to tell my wife all the time, I am a wonderful ball of contradictions, but I'm also learning, and that's what it means to be human, to have those contradictions, but then also at times to be able to challenge yourself and have the courage to be disliked, which we'll come back to that later. So that's what I think being human is.
And, I know that it's really easy to see that there's a human on a screen with a cool background and everything, but I don't know if people get a full scope of what it is, like your priorities. What are all the things that you're balancing in your life? Like maybe what are all the different roles that you see on a daily basis, weekly basis that you have to balance on top of making sure that you, as a Dave, are doing good as well?
I like that you said that as a Dave because really, I kind of play with this notion that I kind of talk to myself as this being rather than just saying me, because
Mm.
I'm a collection of bacteria, viruses, thoughts, words from peoples in my past. And so I'm balancing all of that while figuring out how to overcome my own internal biases or biases. And what I balance the best is sleep. I love to sleep because I love to dream. I've studied with Dr. Krippner, who is a sleep specialist, and it's fascinating how much we get from sleep and how much we don't know about how sleep supports us. So balancing sleep, balancing supporting the hundreds of people I get to support every day, which is a blessing, and in different ways. I have different tracks, including clinical tracks, technical tracks, interpersonal tracks where I'm supporting other people. And it's really about making sure that I can recharge, take a break. I'm just coming off of a recharge. So that's why I'm extra energetic right now. If you'd talked to me about 3 weeks ago, it probably would have been a little slower, man. Ugh. But I'm good now. I'm good. So I found a way to balance by making sure I'm sleeping, making sure I'm resting, making sure I'm hydrating.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm here with the water. You guys know in general, I'm always doing it. There we go. Priorities, baby. Look at that. Okay, last question that I have for you before we do an intro for Philip. You're a dad, you're a husband, you're the VP of the guides community. What else takes up your time that like you have responsibilities for that people are looking to you as an expectation of like, I need support from this person?
So I'll start with being a guide. I have people who come to me from a guided standpoint, as well as supporting students who are on their doctoral journey or going into research. So I prioritize that because I always am thankful for the mentors that I had in my life. So mentoring is really important. Being able to give back. If you're from a certain community, you may have heard, each one teach one, and that's a important concept to keep in mind because we're all learning from each other, and I'm also open to be mentored, which I continue to be. The people I've connected with over the last 4 years have been incredible, and the mentorship that I've received from them has helped me grow as a person so that I can then teach someone else. So there's a lot of responsibilities, but what has helped me balance those responsibilities is knowing that I'm of service to someone else. I'm
Hmm.
here to help someone else. Even though we live in an individualistic society here in the Western society, specifically the States, I know that I'm an individual who's a part of a whole, and I have to contribute to the whole. So that's the way I look at it.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that. I know that a lot of what you said is going to trickle into today's conversation. And I love that you said that you're a being of service. I ran a large community in a business for many, many years. And I was like, and this fits in perfectly to the happiness versus the hustle. Cause we were like, yeah, we're bosses, BOSS, being of sacred service. So instead of just hustling, saying that we were getting things done all of the time, we were operating in service and we were doing a high level of execution of work. But because we were in service to others, it became a lot easier. And maybe that's something that you take away from this conversation of how can I be of service to the people who are looking to me instead of feeling sometimes like people are draining you because people do need us. At the end of the day, people are always going to need us. And sometimes it's just perspective that can be the shift for that. So Philip, we have Philip, he's a guide in our community. He also takes on a lot of different roles as well. So same thing. What does being human first mean to you in regards to happiness versus the hustle and finding balance in your life?
Uh, First off, thank you for having me. And hello, everybody. I'm a frequent uh contributor to this kind of thing, but balance is especially important because as a society, we're kind of taught all hustle. You know what I mean? Like, and there is no real room for, or I'll say it like this: the family first and yourself first is only lip service to kind of get you in the door, right? And then once you get in the door, you actually realize that they're not really, they don't really care about me. I become a number, I become a metric, I become a productivity rate, I become something like that. And understanding that, yes, you do have a responsibility once you take that position to produce, but you also have a responsibility to yourself to be healthy enough to produce. And I think that that's the balance that a lot of people don't get, is understanding that for you to be able to hit your productivity rate, you need to be your best self or at least close to it, right? A lot of us don't necessarily operate with at 100% optimization all the time. But that does not mean that you shouldn't be trying to strive for that 50-50 balance of productivity and also um, um, sacred time for yourself as well. And I think that the sacred time for yourself is just as, if not more important than anything that you're doing for anybody else, because I think that serving others requires a full cup so that you can run it over.
Oh, so beautiful. I'm so happy to have both of you here on this conversation today because so much of what you're saying is, I feel like a lot of us kind of have an inkling of how we're supposed to operate, but we operate in a world that tells us the exact opposite. So, with that balance and with filling your own cup, what are the roles that you have in your life? Dad, husband, entrepreneur, whatever else. Like, what are all the other roles that you have that are taking up your time that you have to prioritize on top of making sure that you're at 100% before anything else?
Well, just to kind of illustrate what this is, I'm actually at my internship site right now doing this. You know what I mean? And so, even in that, like, I am trying to balance like being here and then also doing the work that I do on from an internship standpoint while being in my master's program for marriage and family therapy, looking at doctoral programs for clinical psychology or something close to that, while also leading a household, a beautiful wife who actually is a life guide as well, in our journey together. You know what I mean? And then uh, everything else, being a brother, being a son, all of the things that are not work but are still responsibilities of mine. Um, it can become daunting if I actually was to sit down and make a list of everything that I do. You know what I mean? Like it's like if you've ever not realized how valuable or how important you are, just sit down and make a list of all the things you do and recognize all of the responsibility that comes from each of those roles. Once you do that, hopefully that will help to restore your some of the self-worth and self-confidence in yourself by saying, hey, I have all of these roles, but like you said, Kira, all of these people need me too. Do you know what I mean? And so I hold a lot of titles. I have a lot of responsibility, but I also know that I am also responsible for my happiness, my peace, my inner energy, and the drive to keep going, and also knowing when the best thing that I can do for my drive is actually to stop, to sit, to rest, to recharge, so that I can go back out there and give everything that I can.
Thank you so much. I know all of that is so valuable. And, if there's one action step we've given you so far, it would be to write out that list. And yes, it can be overwhelming, but also it can be a place of like, gosh, drop 555 in the chat if you have that feeling at the end of the day or at the end of the week that you didn't get everything done that you wanted to and you feel unsatisfied with what your day looked like. And some of the times it's because we don't realize everything that we are doing. And it's such a beautiful point that you made, Philip, is like there are a lot of other responsibilities outside of our jobs as well. And none of us are telling you to not place responsibility on your job, but Philip said it really wonderfully. Like you can't show up fully if you're not full, as like your own cup runneth over into all of these other responsibilities as well. And maybe your biggest responsibility isn't your job. Maybe your biggest responsibility is making sure that you're good for every responsibility, and then your job gets to flourish as a byproduct of that. But in our culture and in our society, we're taught the reverse. And it's why a lot of us identify with that stress, with that overwhelm, and with that lack of satisfaction. And that lack of internal satisfaction on a regular basis will make the easiest task that you could do feel like you're picking up a boulder and dragging it across the entire country, because we just haven't necessarily been taught to how to have that satisfaction. So with that, I'm a huge advocate of mentorship and coaching. When I was looking at coming into a new organization, I found Life Guides and I just about screamed of excitement, because it's really hard sometimes to find qualified and certified people who can help you on their journey. There are a lot of people on social media selling their coaching packages, but maybe haven't really gone through the actual work that it takes to get to the place where they can help you grow. And that's where Life Guides gets to be a really beautiful resource. But for me, knowing that coaching and mentorship is built into what we offer here is so beautiful, because the Kira that I am today is a byproduct of the vulnerability that I've had to have to say, I cannot do this alone. The way that I have been doing this does not work anymore. I don't feel satisfied. I don't feel fulfilled. I'm a high achiever. I'm a top sales distributor. I've run my own business, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like crap at the end of every night, and that's a problem. And it's really cool. We're looking at some generational differences as well, where like my parents, I watch my mom all the time overwork herself and take on way too much responsibility and end up unfulfilled. And I could never demonize her for that. It's also a byproduct of society. But I use that as my own barometer of I don't want to be there. I don't want to feel that. And that means that I have to take real responsibility for my life and stop letting people hold power over the way that I show up in my life every day. Go ahead.
Let me say something to that. And I think looking at your mom and her generation, I do the same thing. My mom actually works third shift, and I don't think that she's missed a day in 12 years or something like that, which is crazy because first off, third shift, like we can stop there, but also to not have missed a day is crazy. Is a very impressive mark. But I also think that we don't really take the time to understand how much society has shifted from those times to what it is now. Nowadays, society has almost demanded that you can't miss a day, right? Because that income is so necessary to the livelihood. There are so many people living paycheck to paycheck, not able to meet the demands or even flourish, and it's because of all of the things that have been happening, what it means to live versus the kind of stagnating cost of wages and things like that. All of those things matter, and then also but it has a profound effect. 83% of US workers experience say that they experience work related stress. 83%. That is an astronomical number. Globally, 44% say that they experience workplace stress, which is a marketed jump from what it was 5 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, just think about that. Like, people are going to work, having to try to tough it out, not feeling fulfilled, but knowing that this is essentially the only option that they have. That's why it's important to have conversations like these because we know that we are overworked and underrested. And so, what can you do in those times when you feel overworked and underrested? When you do get rest, to fully recharge yourself, to fully reset yourself so that you can go back to work with the same vigor and the same energy that not only will help you flourish, but also will kind of like Dr. Dave said, like when you come with that energy and you're flourishing, like now you are able to serve the other people around you, and that energy is contagious. So
So beautiful. Dave, I brought up the generational conversation based on a conversation that you and I first had regarding the Being Human First series and kind of like the inception of it. Is there anything else that you want to say on that specific part of the topic?
Just quickly, that our generations are going to continue to evolve. When I talk to my father and he tells me about his work ethic and how he structured work and not taking a break was kind of a badge of honor, it's evolving now because we're dealing again, going back, call back, almost like I'm a comedian. We live in complexity. There's so much more complexity now than there was 50 to 60 years ago. And so, generationally speaking, we're learning from our past generation, but we're also setting up for 6 or 7 generations ahead of us. And I think we need to continue to think about that more often. What are we instilling in the generation that's coming behind us and behind them when it comes to how do we work? How do we survive? How do we thrive? Not just survive. How do we actually make what we're doing worth something rather than just being a cog in a wheel or working in a steel mill? No offense, and I'm not joking at you, Philip. He's a Steelers fan. So I'm not joking at you, but I'm just saying things have changed. We don't need as much focus on 40 hours a work week. That's why in some countries they've moved to the 4-day work week, and it's worked because times are changing.
Thank you so much for talking about the legacy that we get to leave. And again, that's where we talk about being bosses and being of sacred service. Your life, I know we live in America in a very individualized culture, but your life is more than just your life. And the responsibility that you take over your life is a responsibility to everyone around you. And the reason why we're putting on these conversations is because these aren't conversations that a lot of people are having, but these are conversations that people need to hear. And when I was looking, I'll give you an example. When I was shutting down my business, I was like, cool, I'm ready to work in an organization again, to have a team again, and to not be the leader of everything, but I want to contribute to something bigger. I learned very quickly that there were certain things that I couldn't add. And my mom is like a phenomenal mentor, amazing restaurateur, has like run some of the top restaurants in New York City in the 80s, like crazy woman. But I couldn't ask her advice in certain things because her mentality was different than my mentality, in the way of where she's like, you have to be more professional. You have to apply for a job multiple times a day. I only applied for like 3 or 4 jobs because they were aligned with my internal values, and making sure that it was values aligned versus like this perspective of what that I need to have a job right now was really important, because if I at least know what a company's values are, right, then I can start having the conversations that are based on those values and advocating for myself based on those values that we all have in common. And I had to learn how to advocate for myself. And I was like, okay, there's certain things that I can ask her, but there are also certain things that I can't ask her. And she's learning from me now. So she watches me take time for myself and be like, I'm getting stressed and overwhelmed. No one's going to benefit from this if I keep moving forward. And now she took a day off unexpectedly. Never, she's almost 65. She turned 65 in like 3 months. Never ever would a woman in her in her 60s, born in the 60s, ever be like, I'm just taking a day off because I should take a day off because I need it for my well-being. But people, the generations before us get to learn from us, and the generations beyond us also get to learn from us. And that's where your work gets to be more than your own work. So before we dive into a conversation that I'm actually really excited about happiness versus joy, and we have a book that Dr. Dave is going to recommend, I feel like this is a perfect point for us to start to get a little bit of insight on where you all are. So there is a poll that I'm going to pull up on the screen, where you're going to be able to rate on a scale of 1 to 10 how your happiness is, how your balance is, and then where you are right now. Because essentially, our goal is you're not here just for this session. You're here for all 3 of our webinars and all 3 of our coaching sessions, so you can see the actual transformation that happens in you. And we're going to do a survey at the end to go from where we are right now to where we get to be at the end of all of this. So you should see that on your screen, and you can submit the answers right there. And as far as Dr. Dave or Philip, whichever one of you want to kind of like have a dialogue as people are filling out this survey, I want one of you to kind of talk about like how do you prioritize happiness and balance in your life, and maybe the transition in your life of like a time when you weren't prioritizing that and the effects that you saw on yourself versus where you're at now and what that has evolved inside of you and how that has given you positive change moving forward, and not only for yourself but the people who are you're also responsible for and of, just based on this life that we're a social species. We're never going to be alone, and we're operating more than just us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's more than just us. And when you talk about prioritizing happiness, there was a time where I prioritized um, production. Like, how much am I producing? What am I getting done? How much am I striking off of the proverbial to-do list? And I was finding that I really wasn't getting anywhere. I was just focused on it. Every day was another list, another list. And Philip, you probably have experienced it too, where it's just a focus on what needs to get done today, and how can I get it done. And we talk about everyone's counting on us, and it's a double-edged sword if you don't know how to wield it,
Yeah.
because you can feel like, because everybody's counting on you, that you can't take a break. Philip, have you ever felt like you couldn't take a break, for example, with some of your responsibilities because people needed you?
Oh yeah, I've definitely felt like that. I've gone to work sick. I've gone to work hurt. Well, first and foremost, I am a veteran, so I was in the military. So imagine what that's like, where my will isn't even my own because I volunteered towards a greater cause. Now that's a phenomenal thing, and the military did a lot for me. But one thing that it did teach me is I'm not always willing to go that far when there is no prioritization for myself. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like there had to be some moment where I could say, hey, I need a break, or hey, I need this. And even when I got out, transitioning back into the civilian world, I realized that, man, like the hustle don't stop just because I left. You know what I mean? Like now it was even more treacherous when I got out than it was when I was in, you know what I mean? And so just recognizing that, like, I just felt like there was no breaks. Like, I am the answer. But if you're the only answer, then you have not done enough with the knowledge that you have so that you don't have to be the only answer. Knowledge is
Absolutely.
only knowledge, and it's only intellect when you keep it to yourself. Knowledge is meant to be shared. And so the moment you decide to hoard the knowledge, you are not doing what you need to be doing with that information because it's not yours to keep. It has been and always is yours to pass on. It is your job, it is your duty, it is your responsibility to give people to give of yourself, and especially as it pertains to knowledge and experience, so that you don't feel overwhelmed by being the only one who has the answers. You know what I
That's
mean?
wisdom.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the wisdom, to take that information and or use your intellect, take the information, turn it into knowledge, and then the wisdom to use it, meaning to trust others. And one thing we're going to get into in a moment talks about, especially for those of you who are in people leader positions right now. You have people that are depending on you. There's a difference between trust and confidence.
Mhm.
Like, for example, when you start your relationship, especially relations at work, we all have relations at work. Um, we are always trying to start with a place of trust. How can I trust that this person is going to get the job done if I'm not able to do it? Once you see that they're able to do it, that starts to build confidence. Now you're beyond trust. You're confident that they're going to do it. And then it's like a cycle. You start to instill that confidence back into them, and then they reverberate it back to you by doing what they're supposed to do. And that's a interesting way to look at leadership when it comes to, like, I have to be the only one, and there's so much that's riding on me, and people are relying on me to get this done. we have a community. And that's what we are here right now. This is a community. And we're relying on each other to share information, share knowledge, and grow from that.
Two things that I heard from both of you is that need to have that community aspect is really important. And I feel like if you're the only person, like you were talking about, Philip, and you put this responsibility on yourself, or you allow a sense of responsibility to be placed on you that you feel like you are the only one who's able to execute on, it could take something that you love and turn it into dread very, very quickly. And one of the things that I had to learn personally were two things. I had to learn vulnerability. I had to learn how to ask for help, because in our American culture, we're not taught how to ask for help. And we're not taught necessarily that you can say no to things, that you can say, I don't have the capacity for that today. But I had to learn that. And I thank goodness I had coaches and mentors who were like, you're a lone wolf and you push yourself way too much and you're trying to act like a man who gets everything done. But at the end of the day, you're just a cute little girl and you can only do so much. And you need to tell people that you can only do so much. And you have to be really clear about your boundaries too, because people are going to take from you until you tell them that they can't take from you anymore. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the conversation of like, that big blow up moment. But if you're like, I know my capacity, I know that I'm a human, I know I have a lot of responsibilities, I know what I'm freaking good at, I also know what I'm not that good at. And I know what I need, and I know when I'm feeling good, and I know when I'm not, and I can articulate that, that's going to be a huge game changer for you. And having the trust in yourself, like I know at least my team in Life Guides, they know that I'm not going to work overwhelmed, and they have the confidence in me that I'm going to let them know that I need help. But a different version of Kira would have worked way too hard for not enough money, not enough time off, and never asked for what I needed and been really resentful at the end of the day. And your resentments, if you do have internal resentments, maybe about your workplace or the responsibilities you have at home or the responsibility from your friends or family, resentments are built from a lack of boundaries and a lack of communication. I want to read some of this to you, and then we're going to have Dr. Dave talking about happiness versus joy. And I think as far as boundaries and vulnerability goes, he's going to talk about, like he talked about in the beginning, the courage to be disliked and what that looks like and how that can play a pivotal role in your lives. So, as far as how many of you prioritize happiness and balance in your life, so we're kind of like half and half-ish. About 50+% of us don't really prioritize our happiness and balance, but about half of us do prioritize our happiness and our balance in our lives, which I think is really phenomenal. And what's beautiful is that for all of almost everyone who responded, you said that it is important to you to learn how to prioritize happiness and balance. And that's why Life Guides gets to be here for a tool for you. And that's why we get to start having these conversations, because you having that desire to learn, you have a place right now where you can start to learn. And we've cultivated that container. So, twice a month, I'm showing up and I'm learning how to prioritize that balance. Now, a lot of you are saying that your current relationship, some of you guys are saying that there are things happening in your personal life that are affecting that. Your obligatory responsibilities and toxic familiar relationships are setting things off balance, that you prioritize your to-do list before you prioritize yourself. Some of you are right now unapologetic for making time for yourself, which I love to see. But a lot of you are feeling like you're not a priority, you're feeling confused and having a foggy relationship with happiness. And some of the unhealthy habits that you have are you're staying up late doom scrolling, you're allowing toxic people to monopolize your time, you're not taking off work when you're not feeling well, you feel guilty for taking time for your own happiness. Um, some of you guys are not eating healthy food. You're forgetting that you're a person too. And the list goes on and on and on. So we get these results because hopefully by the end of March, we're going to have really different answers. And you all are going to have cultivated habits and routines and have that mindset of your priority first. So, with all of that being said, thank you so much for responding to the survey. And Dr. Dave, I'm giving it to you to drop us into joy and happiness and the courage to be disliked.
Right on. So first, when it comes to happiness versus joy, Dr. Laurie Santos, she formerly of Yale University, provided a course to undergraduate students on how to cultivate happiness. And what she found in her research is that happiness is fleeting. It's not a continuous thing. You can find happiness, and as anyone who uses any social media platform, that little bit of dopamine shot you get when you get that like does not last long. It's going to end. And then what's interesting about that is that you can almost think about the dopaminergic system, or the system that produces the dopamine within your brain, as being like a lever. And every time you spike it, they're a little gremlin, so to speak, that are kind of stepping on, trying to get you back to what's called homeostasis, or equilibrium, back to balance. So again, happiness is fleeting, but where you can continuously be joyful is to find joy even in the mundane. Uh, Archbishop Desmond Tutu has a book on joy that I highly recommend, because it talks about finding those joyful moments in what you do, those joyful moments even in the mundane. When you're washing dishes, if you're more likely to wash the dishes, maybe even singing a song or doing a dance while you're doing it, especially if you have a family, you'll probably be more likely that they're going to want to join and help you, rather than if you're washing the dishes and you're, oh, I can't believe they don't wash the schmutz off the plate. I'm gonna, these people suck. Then they're probably not gonna come and help you. It's going to be a frustrating kind of tension creating opportunity in that relationship. And we keep talking about the courage to be disliked. And the reason why we continue to say that is, and we're going to drop the link in the chat in a minute, it's a book that I highly recommend for anyone who's trying to understand how to be human in this industrialized world. It's written by a Japanese author, but it has Western perspectives, which I think is an excellent balance. One of the key concepts that I received from reading this book for like the third time is all people are equal. Let me say that again. All people are equal, but we're not the same.
Mhm.
Life is not a competition. You should only compare yourself to your ideal self. You know, sometimes we try to compare ourselves to the, IG models or the billionaires or the people on TV. That's not who we are. Although they are a part of our community, our global human community, they're not who we are. And because we're not the same, we should celebrate our differences. And when you can celebrate someone else's difference, you can find the joy in doing that too. Find the joy in saying, hey, this person that came to this argument in a different way than I did. Maybe there's something I can learn from that. Or maybe there's something that I can improve my perspective. Because really, we're all living our own lifestyle. And your lifestyle is a mixture of your perspective, your experience, and also where you want to go. So, one of the key ways, now that we've been talking about joy and happiness, one of the key ways to find joy is to be in the moment. And I'm not just talking about meditation or mindfulness, but I mean be in the moment. And I'm going to try to do this kind of third person omniscient narration of me right now. So, this being Dave is currently having a conversation in a community of like minded and also different minded people, where he's learning, growing, and just sharing his wisdom and knowledge with others. But that's me narrating in the moment. I'm not saying narrate in the moment. That might be weird at work. Don't do that. So I don't want you guys to say, Dr. Dave said I can narrate at work. It'll make me find my joy. But you can find yourself in the moment, able to acknowledge what's going on in the moment. How are you reacting in the moment? And at all times, understand that the thoughts that you have are just thoughts. They're like comets. They're not true. I can have a thought right now. I can fly. That's my thought. Is it true? I'm not going to go try. It probably would end bad, so I'm not going to go do that. But these are steps that you can take every day, just being in the moment. And if you're having a difficult time, coming back and looking at it from a different perspective, asking for support, which takes courage. But the number two thing from the courage to be disliked that I learned is the courage to understand that if you are disliked by someone else, and that brings you unhappiness, know that that's not your task. That's not your responsibility. How they look at you is for them. That's their perspective. How you look at yourself, that's your responsibility. That's your task. The actions you do, that's your responsibility. That's your task. So I encourage everyone, if you don't have Audible, Libby app, the Libby app is available on iOS and Android. It allows you to download books through your local library. So I like to use it because save me time once in a while. So anyway, off that tangent, but I wanted to share that it's important to understand the difference between happiness, which is fleeting, and how to build joy, which is sustainable.
Mhm.
So beautiful. Philip, do you have any remarks in regards to joy or happiness? Or maybe, I know we talked about maybe diving into societal pressures as well, but we've also talked a little bit about that. So wherever you want to flow, as we start to come to the end of our conversation, maybe some final remarks, some final, like, these are big things that have helped me, and me, I mean, you. Yeah, drop us in. Give us your wisdom. Give us that insight. Don't keep all the intellect to yourself, Philip. We need that knowledge.
I think you said something that triggered a thought in my mind, and it was regarding social media. And I think that social media has done a fantastic job of not becoming social media, but becoming kind of a vehicle for um, negative self-reflection. And I think that is a problem because it's used incorrectly. I think that when it first started, it was meant for good, but obviously, as time goes on, people will use it for what it's used for. And I think that the big thing to understand is specifically now a lot of people use social media for their projections of what they want people to see them as opposed to who they really are. And so if you're comparing yourself to those projections, you're oftentimes and most likely not even really comparing yourself to a real person. You're comparing yourself to the person that they want you to see them as, or they have made themselves to be. You don't actually know that person. You don't actually have any insight into who that person actually is. All you can see oftentimes is a picture and a post that they probably took from a book that they heard but didn't read and they liked the quote. You know what I mean? Like, so, don't all in all I'm saying about that is comparison is the thief of joy. Do try your best not to compare yourself to what other people want you to see them as, and instead focus on who you are as a human being, because I think that will allow you to not feel like you have to project yourself as somebody other than who you authentically want to show up as. Because what we really want, what we really need, is for people to feel comfortable showing up in their own skin with their own quirks and their own hairstyles and their own looks and their own dress and their own personalities and their own deficiencies and their own positive things as an authentic person. That is what creates the kind of connection that we need to facilitate moving forward in the world. And also, you said something else. So that was one. Two, as a man, and I think you said this too. So I really was keeping count of what you were saying. It's how you know I was listening. Like I was really listening. Um, we are often taught to be the help. We're not often taught to ask for it. And I think that that limits a lot of men's potential because all we are focusing on is trying to be everything that somebody else needs for us instead of trying to ask for help and get the help that we need to continue to build ourselves. You will build yourself much higher when you need help. What is it? It basically, there's a parable about a thread, how one breaks easily, but three strands are not easily broken. That also goes with communication and relationship and help, and balance, which kind of gets back to what we were talking about, like just understanding that you can work yourself into being the help that other people need. But to really set yourself up for success, what you also have to do is be willing to ask for the kind of help that will propel you to the next level. Because ultimately, you don't know everything, and you won't know everything. And by getting the information from others, I actually work with older adults, and I tell them all the time, when I'm sitting in these sessions, when you guys are giving me the experiences in your lives and the wisdom that you have, I'm actually learning from you. And I think that we as a society do a poor job of listening and learning from the elders in our lives, because they're the ones who have the lived experience that can actually facilitate the kind of learning and understanding of what's going on in the world and what we can do. Now, it doesn't mean that their perspective is current, because like Dr. Dave said, everything changes. But at the same time, their experience is invaluable, because even though things change, the more things change, the more things stay the same. You know what I mean? And so understanding that by talking to those people and gathering their experiences, you might glean something that might not seem like it is appropriate for the current times that we live in, but in all honesty, it is exactly what you needed to hear to get you to the next level and the next step. And that's what's important, is building self. You don't build self by yourself. You know what I mean? So,
Nice. All right. Let me add one quick thing about, especially to all men. If there are any men listening, if you're listening in the future on YouTube, there's this phrase
Can I,
that's going on.
while you're speaking, I just want there's one
Oh, you're
person
gonna
who
have
asked
close.
a question in the chat,
Oh, let's
and
answer that.
I wanna end this with a Q&A. So Dave's gonna say what he's gonna say, but also if there are any questions that you have, drop them now so that we can start ending the conversation with making sure that you have the support. So Dave, go ahead.
Okay. It's really, I'm learning this from kids. Again, generation. There are two generations below me. And I'm learning from them. We listen and we don't judge. I don't know if you've heard that phrase being used,
mhm.
right? And so men, sometimes we have to do that, because here's what I learned about judgment. When you're judging someone, you are instinctively saying that you're better than them. You may
Yes.
not say it out loud, but you may say, if you're judging someone, I'm better than you, or I've already gone through that, when really there should be no judgment. Like, judgment is an illusion. We don't have, dominion or power over people. It's a hierarchical design that's been built into Western society, but we don't have to follow it. So anyway, my message to men: we listen, we don't judge.
So beautiful. If any of you have seen like the Instagram or TikTok trend, it's like families or couples telling each other things that they never told each other for however long they've had a relationship. And in an ideal world, we all have the vulnerability and the permission to be ourselves, where it's like we can just be who we're going to be. We don't have to be feared for being judged. And a lot of us don't say the things that we actually feel as humans because we're concerned about how other people will take it. But I think the number one thing that we can focus on is it's not about how other people perceive you, it's about how you feel, because people's perceptions of you are always going to change. And there's so many things that Philip and Dave said that I could have like 7,000 more conversations about, which I probably will in our Motivational Monday series that I host every Monday. I might even bring Phil and Dr. Dave as some guests to help have the conversations, because there's a lot that we touched on and a lot that matters. And I just could never have it all contained into 60 minutes. How could we ever? But one question that we had in the chat, Philip, that someone asked is, how do we stop being the help?
I don't know that you stop being the help. I think that you recognize that you can enhance your life by not just being the help,
Mm.
but by asking for it as well. You can basically play a dual role. Like I pride myself on being a source of, advice and compassion and care for other people. But I also know that to be my best self, I also need a place to go for that. You know what I mean? And so as much as I can say that I want to stop, I don't want to stop being the help. I don't. I always want people to be able to come to me and sit in front of me, whether virtually or in person, authentically, and be able to share their story without feeling like they're being judged or condemned for anything or that they've done. But I also know that it's not just about me being the help, it's about me being able to ask for it. That there's strength in that, and understanding that you can't do it alone, I think is the first step in really being the kind of person that other people feel comfortable coming to.
Well, thank you so much to both of these amazing gentlemen for joining us for the conversation today. And I think, even beyond that, thank you all for trusting us to have this conversation and for trusting us as a source of wisdom, because I think either way, the three of us would have enjoyed having this conversation, but it's a lot more powerful and a lot more meaningful with each of you here with us, learning and growing and seeing that this is something that matters to you all. And when we were putting together this programming, I was listening to podcasts and doing so much. And a lot of people are on a similar thread of like, I can't continue life just being mechanical. I have to remember that I'm a human. I have to remember that I have my own vulnerabilities. And I have to remember that if I don't show up for myself, then how can anyone show up for me? How can I give anyone the truth of what they need? So I'm going to drop a couple of links in the chat as we start to close this out. Uh, we have Philip, who's an actual guide in our life guides community. I just dropped his link in the chat for you. If you're like, I really relate to his story, I would love support. By all means, he is there for you. He's here to help you. We're not just saying fun words about how much we love to support people. We actually mean it with every single layer of our heart, and I can say that confidently for all three of us. And then the next link I just dropped in the chat, which it didn't show as a link, unfortunately, but you can just copy and paste. That's our link tree. It has the registration link for our coaching session next week. It's going to be the three of us again, but it's going to be more tactical of like, hey, this is what I'm going through in my life. How would I actually apply this? And then there's one other thing that I'm going to drop in. We created a worksheet for you. We're going to use this worksheet in our coaching session next week as a guide for the growth that we're looking to foster during this time that we have together. You can also use this worksheet with a guide. So if you go to the link tree for life guides, you can schedule your first guide call there. And you can use that worksheet and be like, I don't prioritize happiness. I don't prioritize myself. These are the questions that I want some answers to. Can you help me find that and find the source of happiness in myself that I have yet to tap into? So there's so much that we could continue to say. We've got a couple more months of conversation, so come back and join us. Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Dr. Dave. It has been a pleasure, and thank you to everyone who was here with us. We will see you next week well, hopefully Monday I'll be seeing you, but all three of us will be seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.